everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Lit Happens. Today is a very special episode, part of our Teacher Tales series, and we have Danielle, a teacher librarian, here with us today. Hello, Danielle. Welcome to our podcast.
Hi, Belinda. Thanks for having me on.
We're so excited to have you. We know that our listeners are just going to get a lot out of hearing about your journey to this role, your experiences, and just those insights into what being a teacher librarian is all about. And it's a really special episode. We're really thankful that you've agreed to join us. And we can't wait for our listeners to, learn a bit about you. We're trying to really offer our listeners, some insights into different teachers' experiences, where they began, where they've evolved, and we really think you're the perfect candidate for this. So we're really excited. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you again for having me and for giving me this platform to share everything that's wonderful and lovely about the teacher librarian role.
Oh, pleasure. Well, we'll just get straight into it then, Daniel. We might start with our first question. We often ask this of our Teacher Tales interviewees. How did you become a high school teacher, and what drew you in? If you'd like, you could talk about your KLA and anything else that you'd like to share.
Yeah, so I was very lucky that I started out as an English and ancient history teacher at my old high school, which very rarely you get a job straight out of university, and I was #blessed to be able to get that job and to have it so close to home, to have it so close to my old high school, and in both of my passionate KLAs was absolutely a blessing. But if you had told me when I was in year 10 or even in year 12 or even at the end of my first arts degree that I was going to become a teacher, I would have absolutely laughed at you. I remember a conversation I had with one of my cousin's wives who is a teacher, and she said, "Oh, Danielle, you'd make such a great teacher. You've got such a great charisma to you." And I absolutely laughed at her and said, "There is no hecking way that I could ever be a teacher." I was always that kid. I was the nerdy kid. I loved playing teachers. I loved doing the workbooks. I loved, with my pocket money, I would go and buy like grammar style workbooks to work on in my free time. I was that kid. But I could not speak in public to save my life. I would get so nervous.
Really?
Yeah, I would shake. I would go red, which of course with my hair was not a great color combination. I would start to sway and my mouth would go super dry. So I totally understand with so many of our kids that the anxiety that they feel when they have to present or when they have to perform. So yeah, back in the day, there was no chance of me becoming a teacher. And it wasn't really until my 4th year of uni that it started to become a serious possibility for me. I had done the arts degree. I did an additional honours degree on top of that for ancient history. And my plan was that I was going to become an academic. I was going to sit seconded in the library for all my time and occasionally venture out when I had to give a speech or give a presentation. But for the most part, it would just be me and the research and the people who were long dead that would occupy my time. But at the time, I'd actually been tutoring for a fair bit, and I was really lucky that my mum had made me take piano lessons from the age of 3. And so during high school, I dabbled in piano tutoring for a little bit, and I really loved that moment of aha, when the kids finally get it, and knowing you've made that positive difference. As you know, like there is nothing in the world that beats that moment when you know you've made a positive impact on another person's life, and especially a young person who comes to you with trust and hope in their eyes that you can make their life better. And so, I started out my journey to being a teacher through piano tutoring. And then from there, after I finished the HSC, while I was at uni, I was teaching English as a tutor as well. And so it kind of came down to, well, I could go into academics, I could sit secluded and not really make much of a difference. Still enjoy myself, absolutely, but the difference I would make in teaching would be far more, I suppose, valuable to society. So, yeah, that's why I became a teacher.
Wow. So that feeling of that achievement and the difference that you made in those students you were tutoring really started to make you think, I could do this as a career. Could definitely do this.
Yeah, and it was probably in my 3rd year of uni that I had to give a presentation, and it was on Joan of Arc. I remember the moment really vividly. I was in one of the old lecture halls in Sydney Uni, standing at this old wooden lectern, and I looked out and I realised, you know what? I actually know what I'm talking about here. I have done the preparation. I know my facts. I know what I'm talking about. And even if I don't, nobody's listening anyway. So it kind of took the pressure off a little bit.
Totally. But so maybe you felt like having that confidence in, I know what this subject is, I know what I'm talking about. Did that kind of alleviate previous public speaking tension that you had and then really made you feel like, oh, I actually could do something like this then?
Yeah, to an extent. I still
Hmm.
definitely get very nervous when I have to speak.
Hmm.
I don't know if you can tell, but I'm quite nervous today talking in front of all your
Can't tell
lovely
at all.
listeners.
So you're doing really well.
Another thing I always credit my mum with doing was to put me into drama classes. So being
Mm,
able to create that persona of Miss Lysart as a teacher who is
true.
knowledgeable, you fake it until you make it sometimes. And I think it was that moment in that presentation that I realized that even if I didn't know and people weren't listening to me, if you come across as confident, people kind of listen regardless.
That's true. Hey, if you've got that feel about your that sense of charisma, I guess, just I think, like you said, that confidence brushes off on the audience because I know I've seen you in a classroom and you have the meeting out the palm of your hand because they know your students know she knows what she's on about, so this is worth a listen to. I think it's really interesting that you were English and ancient history because a lot of teachers, when they pick the two KLAs, it's more of an English and geo or English and modern history that aligns or is more accessible at the universities. So did you have a preference between the two or did you love them both equally or how did you pick those as your KLA areas?
Great question. So
Mm.
I actually prefer ancient history. I know this is very controversial considering my placement that was in the English faculty. Please don't hurt me, any of my lovely English colleagues. But
I feel like
ancient
that's many.
history, yeah, ancient history was my passion, and that was
Yeah.
where I was going to specialize, and that's what I did my honours thesis in. It was one of the reasons I chose Sydney Uni to go to rather than, say, Western Sydney or Wollongong. It was easier for me to get to. I didn't have a car when I finished high school. I didn't have my
Hmm.
license, so I had to rely on public transport. And unfortunately,
Hmm.
Western Sydney University and Wollongong were just too far and too hard to get to. Um,
Hmm.
but also, they didn't have the ancient history units that I wanted to do.
Yeah.
I think the only other uni that offered that degree was Macquarie University, and that was even further for me to get to from
Yeah.
Southwest Sydney. So I went with Sydney for that reason, and I loved the degree. I had some of the best teachers. I had the opportunity to do random things like learn Latin and Old English, and things that you just never would have thought of as being useful, but surprisingly come up all the time.
That's that.
So
Sorry to cut you off. That makes a lot of sense because you're really good with like the linguistics and the etymology, and that makes so much sense to me now because you had that as like a core kind of experience as well, and you enjoyed it, obviously.
Absolutely, it's my nerdiness coming together. When you look at the etymology and origins of words, you've got that
Mm.
beautiful crossover of the English side of things as well as the history side of things, and it's just both of my things together in one.
Yeah,
So, but yeah, that's why I chose Sydney Uni, and really, like, if I could do my time again, I probably wouldn't have fought so hard to do the ancient history side of things because I did end up mainly specialising in English and being in
yeah.
the English classroom. But
Hmm.
having that opportunity to do both KLAs was, I mean, you never get that. I was so incredibly lucky. And to work alongside my old teachers, people who had inspired me as a student, and then they continued to inspire me and teach me and help me become a better teacher and a better person was, I mean, you can't put a price on that experience.
100%. I think, we get so bogged down in how difficult the job is because it absolutely is. And then I think when the feeling of the impact and what they're going to take in their life with them beyond the in the classroom with us is what really helps kind of push us through sometimes or at least offsets some of the really difficult aspects of the job for sure.
And It was like my first 3 years, I reckon I was probably working 70, 80 hours a week
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
bare minimum, because I would go home from work, I would have a nap, I would have dinner, and then I would start teaching resources, creating things, creating programs. Because I did have, for my first few years of teaching, I had both English and history in year 11 and 12. So I was working with 2
Mhm.
sets of syllabus documents, 2 sets of
Yes.
outcomes, 2 sets of faculties. I was attending 2 lots of faculty meetings each week. You know, it was full on, and unfortunately, my mental health and my social life did suffer as a result. But you know, with that trade-off came that incredible benefit of being able to teach in both of those areas, which you don't get very often.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. So not only were you obviously, burnt to the max, the way that all early career teachers are, those first couple of years are a hard slog. But it's almost like because you had that hard slog to begin with, once you pass that hurdle, I mean, I remember you were a really sought after teacher in both English and ancient history. Like your students enjoyed having you, you knew your stuff. And so sometimes like when you are put in that deep end to sink and swim, it is hard, but then on the other side it's almost like you've progressed in like teacher years by like 3 4, just because yeah, you were so into it, in the depths of it with the syllabus. I mean, that couldn't have been easy. Like it's really incredible when I think about how good you are in that classroom setting. And it makes kind of sense now because look at how hard you worked to get there.
I'm gonna copy and paste some of these comments and put them in my next job application, because you are talking me up so beautifully here, Belinda.
You should just get the little bits, save the little bits, and just brick them wherever you go. Just make a little edit of them. I love that.
I'll just put it on my like social media handles. Link here if you want to see my great feedback.
I love that.
um,
That's awesome.
but you are absolutely right. Like it does take a toll. I was very very lucky, as I said, that I had teachers who had taught me as a student and then were able to mentor me as a teacher. Um, in particular, Cheryl Copland, she was, I reckon, the reason that I survived
Fantastic.
those first few years. Her
Mhm.
role as the head teacher of teaching and learning, she only had a small teaching load, which meant that she was available to come into my classes and team teach with me. So not only did I get the benefit of her outside in the staff room, but I got the benefit of seeing her in action and seeing what she could do with the kids and how she created those relationships with the kids and how she managed those more difficult personalities that could potentially throw out a lesson. But you know, she didn't necessarily allow them to throw them out because she was such a strong personality herself. So I think a lot of what I do is very much thanks to her, and of course to Mark Katrupi and Sonia Dokmanovic,
Mhm.
Mark
Mhm.
Rayburn, Julie Kelly, all of these wonderful teachers who I've had the privilege of being mentored by over the years.
I think having those solid mentors really makes the difference between whether you're going to thrive in the career, or whether you're going to find yourself leaving really early on, because we were very very blessed to have all those teachers as mentors, and like they was just so willing to teach us and show us and tell us in a really like constructive, helpful way. And that
Non-judgmental
that
as well.
Totally. And that mentorship is worth its weight in gold. And sometimes I wonder, because of the turnaround in our profession now, are new scheme teachers getting that, or are they missing out on that? Really, really, I think fundamental mentorship. Like, I don't think I could have been teaching what I was teaching without all of their support and feedback either. And it's so crucial. I really hope that every teacher has an opportunity at some point in their career to experience that kind of mentorship. So powerful.
Absolutely. And I know you're very generous with your resources and your time. I try to be the same, but it's really hard, even though teachers now, new beginning teachers, are supposed to have a mentor allocation towards them. You know, in reality, it doesn't often happen
It can
that
be hard.
way. And
Absolutely.
I very much wonder if I had to begin my career again now, I don't think that I would be the teacher that I am. I don't think that I would have made it as far as I have 15 years into my career. I think that it would be
Mhm.
a lot harder, not just for the time and the workload, but also the behaviour of the kids has changed
Yeah.
as well.
Yes.
The demands on teachers as not just educators, but as social workers, as mental health care professionals and providers, as feeders of our children. I mean, there's so much that is put upon teachers now and so many expectations, and we're still expected to achieve at that level when the kids are coming to us and the community is coming to us with all of these expectations. I think I would really struggle if I was to restart my
Yeah.
career nowadays.
Well said, well said. Or like the new teachers, they're coming into, quite a tough territory, and it's a testament to their, willpower and no doubt, the joy and the love that they have of teaching, that they stick around. So very, very well said, Daniel. That was really cool, especially hearing about the ancient history component and how you found yourself teaching those two very different syllabi. That was so good. I might ask you then if we can move on to the next question. I want to talk a bit about now the role of the teacher librarian. So what was your journey to becoming the school's teacher librarian? And I think this will be really interesting for teachers who don't quite understand what they do or what they can offer and how immensely they can help. And so, what insights might you have about this role? Perhaps even potential advice for others who are really interested in being a teacher librarian like yourself. A fabulous one at that. But yeah, I'll let you take the floor.
So I want to preface everything that I'm about to say by starting off with it's the best role in the school,
Mhm.
but it's like every role has its benefits and its downsides.
For sure.
I came to the teacher librarian role. I started sort of considering it in 2018, 2019. I was getting quite burnt out from all of the workload expectations. I was becoming quite resentful of the amount of time that teaching was taking in my personal life and what it was taking me
Mhm.
away from. And I could feel myself becoming less effective in the classroom because I was just at that point where the brain is simply not functioning because you just cannot get any more into that space.
Yes.
And another aspect of it, of course, was the behaviour element that we saw around 2017, 2018, 2019. The demographics at
Mhm.
our high school shifted quite significantly.
Mhm.
We experienced a lot more defiance and disrespect and outright violence. And I actually remember having a conversation with you and a couple of others in the staff room. It must have been 2018. And you said something along the lines of, if things don't change, we're going to have something big blow up. And of course, in 2019, May, we had our first big violent lockdown where a couple of kids went absolutely crazy at each other. And compounding that issue was the fact that everybody else in the school wanted to go and see what was going down between these few
As
kids.
they do, the children, yeah.
As as is human nature, I mean, you only have to look at the
Mhm.
popularity of train wrecks like maths to see that this is what sells, this is entertainment and what passes as fun for people nowadays. Right back into the ancient Roman days with the Colosseum and people smacking the crap out of each other. I mean, bread and circuses. But I was unfortunately injured, as you know, in a couple of different fights in
Mhm.
2019. And so a lot of those thoughts about the resentment, the burnout,
Mhm.
the lack of effectiveness in the classroom really became compounded as a result of that physical injury. I broke my shoulder and dislocated it, and then it just kind of never recovered. And it came to the point where I needed surgery in 2020 to replace
Mm.
a lot of what was going on in there to repair it. So yeah, it just got to the point where I was not in a good space with my career, and it was either I change something and move sideways or I leave education altogether. And
Yeah.
so I was looking at the teacher librarian role very naively. I thought it would be super, super easy. It is super, super fun, but there's a
Mhm.
lot of things going on behind the scenes that I was not aware
Yes.
of when I was first looking at that role. But luckily for me, the teacher librarian at the time, she moved to another school to be closer to where her son was, and the position became vacant as a trial, like backfilled position. And so I was really, really lucky that I was able to step into it and see what the role was, have a feel for what it would look like, what my career could potentially shift into if I chose to make that move. And then in 2021, she actually relinquished that position and it went up to Ad. And I was very, very nervous about the possibility of retraining and fully committing to this. As you know, I
Sure.
love English. I love English teaching. I love classroom
Mhm.
teaching. But it really got to the point where I couldn't sustain what I was doing
Yes.
anymore. And
Yeah,
and
can
as
relate.
that's it's one of the hardest things that you have to do because as teachers, so much of our identity is wrapped up in who we are as teachers.
Yes,
We
absolutely.
are Miss Lysart, Miss Koloska, like we are the teacher. Even when we're out in public, even when we're with our family, we sometimes lapse into those roles and it's really hard
Mhm.
to remove yourself and see who you are outside of that. So for me, it was a real struggle, and I was very lucky to have a lot of guidance from other people who had made similar sideways shifts. Some of the learning and support teachers were really, really good at providing a little bit of perspective as to what that could look like. Yeah, long story short, the job came available. I applied for it, and I was very lucky to be successful. It was a long journey after that point,
Yes.
and I don't know if I probably maybe would have reconsidered taking those steps if I had known how long that journey would be and how hard it would be,
Is this
because
because of the retraining and the degree, like the add-on?
yeah,
Okay, sorry to
so
interrupt, yeah.
you have to do a master's degree and you have to do it within a certain amount of time. Once you've got that
Right,
permanency from the department, you've got, I think it's 2 years they give you, 2.5 years if you get an extension, which I required because of various reasons.
of
But yeah,
course,
you've got to
life.
finish that degree while working full time, while doing all of those extra teacher things.
Yeah,
It was in the middle of the COVID lockdowns. I was teaching Year 12 ancient history at the time in online learning.
yeah,
It was tough. So
it's a hard year.
while I'm glad that I made the change, I think if I had known what I would face, I probably would have been a lot more scared and a lot more reluctant, but I am really glad that I did it. And I would encourage
Yeah,
anybody who is interested in making that sideways shift to look into it because it is a fantastic role. Um, it allows me to combine all three of my passions for reading for pleasure, information fluency and research skills, and also the well-being side of things. I mean, obviously you do all of that when you're a classroom teacher anyway, but the teacher librarian role allows me to do all three in such a unique way, and
yeah,
it gives me a lot of freedom to do the things that I
mhm,
want to do within those elements. Um,
mhm,
it also allows me to support staff as well, which I'm
yes.
obviously very passionate about, and I really, really try to support our new teachers in particular. I'm the prac coordinator for our school, for instance. But anyone who needs assistance or anyone who wants to co-teach, I try to model myself, as I said, on Cheryl Copland and her wonderful experience that I had with her. I try to kind of give back to the community through the teacher librarian role that way.
I think there's so much that you do, like you said, that's a bit behind the scenes, and the skills that you have are extraordinary. I remember you sending a comms around once, and you sent a really friendly, professional reminder to all the staff. Like, can I remind you, this is what we can do in the library. This is what I can do for you. And the list was nothing short of like brilliant. It's like having an actual teaching assistant when you need it. I know that you always help us out in English, engage our students with wide reading, and you show them how to do research and all those fabulous skills that our students now are lacking. What are some of your favorite, I guess, skills or abilities or things that you offer to do as the teacher librarian that other staff might have taken you up on?
Well, you mentioned the wide reading program there. I
Mhm.
have built this from the ground up and I really,
Yeah.
really love it. I think one of the big misconceptions I had about being the teacher librarian was that I wouldn't have to take any work home. And of course, there is a lot less work that I have to take home because I'm not doing the same level of marking and reporting that a classroom teacher would
Yeah.
be doing. But it's also quite different in the sense that I don't have any syllabus to work from necessarily. So when
Hmm.
I'm creating a program like the wide reading program, which is all about giving kids time and access to our library and to our books so that they can see themselves as readers and hopefully overcome some of those barriers that tend to pop up towards pleasure reading and recreational reading when they become teenagers. But it's really it's really difficult in the sense that we don't have a syllabus. So I've had to write this program, I've created the outcomes, I've sequentially listed all of the different activities and
It's
what each of
incredible.
those learning success criteria is going to look like. Whereas as a classroom teacher, especially as like a history teacher, that's literally in the syllabus dot points. You know exactly what you have to teach for this particular unit in its sequence. It's a bit different in that sense.
Yes.
But yeah, the wide reading program, I'm so incredibly lucky that English has come on board with me, and they support me as much as I support them in helping me run it, because they give up a lesson each fortnight with their year 7 and 8 English classes to come and bring their kids into the library and to help me spread that love of reading. And as I said, to help
Yeah.
them get the kids to see themselves as readers. Because a lot of our kids are doing things that count as reading, like listening to audiobooks or maybe
Mm-hmm.
looking at a web comic online, but they don't see those
Mm-hmm.
things as reading, and therefore they don't see
True.
themselves as readers. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as you know, you're currently doing a lot of the literacy stuff at our school, doing a lot of the tutoring of our kids who might need that extra support. If we can get them to see themselves as readers, that's half of the battle.
So true.
So,
So true. No, that's so lovely that you shared that. And even when I think about the library space that you've created, everything you have in there is curated. Like you and I not long ago personally had a discussion about the types of novels that we were reading, and it was so beautiful that the first thing you thought about was, oh, I can actually add that as a series. And I know this student, that student will love that. And I thought, wow, like that's so beautiful because you're not only spreading that love of literature, but you're really getting to know those kids. I know you've got like library monitors in there, you do a lot of social stuff in there, and it's a really beautiful space because I think your library is kind of the opposite of those like don't talk, don't move libraries. Like it's so warm and inviting and fun, and it's so nice to walk in and see the kids actually talking and socializing and reading and not stuck behind the devices. Well, I know a lot of us now, a lot of the schools don't have the devices anymore. But before that program was instilled, it was so painful to walk around and see them all on those devices, not communicating, not engaging. And so you have just built this beautiful atmosphere in there. You should be really, really proud of what you've achieved.
and I think that getting the kids into the library and seeing it as their space is
Mm,
sort of a Trojan horse, because if they're in the library and they
mm,
walk past a display, for instance, or they walk past a shelf where there's a book that might catch their eye, they might be more likely to pick that book up and engage with that as a form of
yeah,
literature. So
true.
yeah, I run a whole bunch of different well-being social activities trying to get the kids to talk to each other, because as we saw when the devices were banned in New South Wales, the phones were locked away, a lot of our kids did not know how to have a conversation. They did not know
Yes.
how to have that back and forwards, how to initiate a conversation with somebody. And so, for
Hmm.
instance, someone might walk into my library and see the kids on the Nintendo Switch each lunchtime and think, "Oh, that's a bit weird. Like, why is that a thing?" But it is actually curated, as you said, because it's intended to get kids who might struggle with holding those conversations or starting those conversations. It's getting them to share an experience. And even if they might not be looking at each other and talking, they're still having that conversation next to each other, and that shared experience is creating those bonds that can lay the foundation for sometimes really solid friendships. And I'm so proud of the fact that it is friendships across year groups. Like we have our year 7s working alongside our year 11s and 12s. It gives leadership opportunities to some of the kids who would never have the guts to go and be part of the junior or senior leadership teams, but they might want to be the person who sets up the switch, or be the person who ensures that everybody gets a fair turn, or to make sure that that kid over there who's kicking off because they've just lost a game is able to calm down and regulate. So
Yeah.
it is, when you walk in and you're like, oh, this is a really noisy library, it might seem a bit shocking, but it is about that well-being element. And things like the board games that I've bought, the Magic the Gathering and Pokemon cards,
Hmm.
the Dungeons and Dragons Club. I mean, they're all aimed at getting kids who might be outliers or sitting on the margins of the social life at school, and giving them a safe space, giving them a place that they can connect with people over similar interests.
Yeah.
Even kids like the creative writing club that I'm currently running with Hannah Marnie. I mean,
Mhm.
it's about extending them, yes, but it's also about connecting them with kids who have similar interests. And I think that's a
Yeah.
huge part of what the teacher librarian role is. And again, it's when you look at the teacher librarian role, it's kind of an iceberg. What you see
Mhm.
is the tip of the iceberg, and then there's all that
Mhm.
planning and all of that research and all of the behind the scenes work that goes on underneath. It's yeah,
Yeah.
but it's such a wonderful feeling to look there and see the kid who was sitting on his own a couple of weeks ago having that conversation and running in because he's excited to talk to his friends about beating them at Super Smash Bros.
That's so sweet. That's so beautiful and so important because we know we all remember what high school was like. We all remember, not fitting in or not finding our niche. And it's lovely that the students know if I need that TLC or a space that's going to comfort me, I know where that is. And so I think that there are a lot of schools where maybe the library might be a bit underutilized, and anybody listening would be just thinking, wow, what look at these amazing things that you are doing to foster that like inclusivity and sense of belonging. Every school needs to have that. So that's that's in,
100%.
that's incredible. Yeah.
And I'm really, really
And-
lucky that I
mhm,
do have support from above. I have senior executive support to put those programs into place. They do give
mhm,
me a lot of freedom to do the programs as I see fit. They trust me and
mhm,
my expertise in this area. I know a lot of
mhm.
teacher librarians are not necessarily that fortunate. So I am, again,
Yeah.
hashtag blessed in my experience
Yeah.
here.
That's wonderful. As are the kids to have you in that space as well. Well, that kind of leads in then to our next question, Danielle. A teaching moment that might have remained with you or had a lasting impact, or just, things that you experience in your day to day of teaching that make you think, this is why I do it. This is why I stuck around. This is why I retrained. And during COVID, I taught online and I studied and I did all that. Yeah. What could you share with us here?
I mean, teaching is full of moments like that. I mean, at least in my experience, I've been very lucky that teaching is full of moments like that. Um,
Mhm.
I remember one year, she was in year 8 at the time, and she was very much a disengaged student. She was much more interested in being at school for her friends and being at school for, the makeup and the social element of things. Um, but I remember her getting semicolons. And I am so passionate about semicolons. They are the most
Yeah.
perfect form of punctuation that I can think of. Like halfway between a comma and a full stop, they are just super sexy. I love them so much. And just knowing that my passion for that very obscure piece of punctuation rubbed off on her, and that she was finally able to get, oh, that's what subordinate clauses are, and that's what dependent clauses are, and that's how you use that piece of punctuation as opposed to these pieces of punctuation to create that
Mhm,
flavor. Like that was
mhm,
a really magical moment. That
mhm.
same class, I absolutely loved that class. It was a mixed ability class, so it was, some kids at the very top end of achievement, some kids who required that extra support. But we were doing The Hobbit, and as you can see from my background, big
Mhm.
fan of Lord of the Rings and the works of Middle Earth. And I was doing The Hobbit with them, and we were up to the chapter where Bilbo and Gollum are having the riddle battle. And because I can do the Gollum voice, the kids were absolutely loving it. They had
Yes, you
a
can.
great time reading it. But then afterwards, I got them to separate into two groups, and I got them to debate whether Bilbo should have won the game because he had actually cheated. And there were a couple of kids who were so disengaged normally, but me stepping back and allowing them the floor. I mean, you know what it's
Mm,
like. Sometimes the kids that you least
mm,
expect are the ones that shine
mhm,
the most when we do loosen up the reins and give them a little bit of trust. And there was a
mhm.
kid, Ryan, who he was one of Adriel's footy boys, and he went to town. He was like Atticus Finch. No, Gollum was wronged. He should have won. He should have got to eat Bilbo. He was legitimately the winner in that riddle contest, and it was just so funny to sit back.
Mm,
I didn't have to do anything during that lesson except to walk around and make sure that they were all on task. But even then,
mm,
like they were on task because yeah, they just connected with that question of fairness in such a visceral, relatable way. It was really, really funny to see, actually.
And so nice, like you said, you gave them the floor, and they had that power within them, and they knew what they were talking about. And so in one situation, they've done all these things. They've been listening. They've understood. They're thinking deeply and personally, and now they're giving their own critical like interpretation. I mean, as an English teacher, doesn't really get better than that, especially when it's a student that is just kind of plodding along, not
Yeah.
really happy. Yeah, I can definitely think of moments like where I've had even a literacy class where they actually engaged in Macbeth and wanted to act out the scenes and understood, and I was like, oh my god, I want to cry because that's
My
why
very
you do
first
it,
year
right?
my
Mm-hmm.
very first year of teaching, I had the literacy class for year 10, and we had to do a Shakespeare text. It wasn't like, "Oh, you have to do a tragedy of some," like, you had to do a
Yeah,
Shakespeare text according to the
yeah,
program as it was at that point, and I'm sitting there
sure.
going, "How am I gonna teach these kids Shakespeare when they can barely read their own names in some cases?"
Yeah,
But yeah, the performance aspect of it, and again, the
the
idea of
fun.
justice and the witches in
Mm,
particular. I had
mm.
3 of the boys who were normally absolute buffheads, and they gave me such a hard time normally, but they were the
Yeah.
best witches that I have ever seen in my life. They
That's
put on the
awesome.
voices, they were
Love
they were
that.
hunching their backs, like, they were getting
Love
so
that.
into it, and it
It's
was really
awesome.
nice. A couple of years later, after I'd finished up with that class and they graduated, one of the boys, Jack, he actually emailed me and said, "Miss, I don't know if you remember me. I know I gave you a hard time, but I just wanted to thank you for everything that you did for me." Like, for him, he was probably 21, 22 at the time. For
Yeah.
him to think back that many years before to those
Mhm.
moments where, yes, he had caused me issues, but to reflect on it and to be grateful for what I had done and the patience and the endurance that I had shown with him, that was really, really lovely. And again, not every teacher manages to get those moments. Sometimes the kids just don't care. But I was
Mhm.
very lucky that I did have a lot of those moments in my career.
That's so beautiful, especially, as an adult who can appreciate the slog of the teachers in front of them, that he would reach out again. It's so beautiful. I remember I had one kid that I saw a while later, and then I must have said something like, "Oh, I don't know, you didn't like me or something." He goes, "No, no, 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 no." I was like, "But you gave me such a hard time." They're like, "Yeah, but that's just who I am." You should have seen the other teachers, sort of a thing. And it's so funny because they surprise you. Sometimes you think like, oh, they're just looking at me thinking, when is she going to stop talking? But deep down, you do reach something and you do connect, and they do see when you work hard, don't they, Daniel? They know
Yes,
when you're putting effort and when you care
100%.
versus when you don't. They might not verbalize it, but they know. I think they're a lot
Yeah.
more perceptive than we give them credit for.
And sometimes you don't realize the impact that you have had until
True,
years later. There
true.
was one boy that I had in the wide reading program the very first year that I put it up, and I was trialing it, and I had really no idea what I was doing with it. And this kid, again, disengaged. He was a little bit of a hellraiser in a lot of his other classes. I was fortunate that I had had his older siblings, so I was able to
Mhm.
get that initial connection early
Sure.
on. And like the older siblings must have told him, like, if you listen to Miss Slicer, she'll
Hmm.
teach you right, like she'll be fine.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but he was not a reader at all. And then at the
Mm.
end of the program, he was reading. He was borrowing books. He actually wanted a copy of the Bible that we had in the library because he preferred it to his own copy, and he offered to swap them over. And I'm like, you know what? Yeah, sure. He is now in work, and he still pops in every now and then to say hi whenever he's around. He'll wander onto the school grounds and pop into the library to say hi to me, tell me what he's doing, what he's up to. But yeah,
That's
it's that we don't often know our impact until many years later. When
yeah.
we're dealing with the kids, where we're kind of dealing with the seed of what they can be, and we're watering them and feeding them and hoping that they'll grow. But it's not until later on that that tree or that flower does actually blossom and bloom.
It's so true. And I think in the same breath, I know, speaking from my own personal experience, it's not when I look back on a class a couple of years later where I say, that was fun. That was fun, enriching, God, did I have a fabulous time being their teacher. And in the moment you're like, especially your harder classes, you're just trying so hard, but then when you
And
look
you're
back, you have
surviving.
such warmth. Yes, yes, but then you just have such warmth in you when you think of that group, like, oh, they taught me something as much as I taught them something. That's
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah. Well,
Yeah, and
that
I think
probably leads us. Go on. Sorry, finish your
I was
thought.
going to
Yeah.
say that kind of links in with the fourth question that you had planned, which
Absolutely.
is, the idea that we're always learning. I
Yes.
mean, as you ask, like, what important life lesson is teaching taught us? We're always learning. And at the end of the day, we are all human. And as teachers, we have lives that go on beyond the classroom. Sometimes those lives get taken over by teaching. They really shouldn't be. In an ideal world, we would have a little bit better work-life balance, or
Yeah.
as I like to think of it, work-life satisfaction.
Yeah.
But yeah, we are all learning and we are all individuals. And I think that the biggest lesson that teaching has taught me is that everyone has their own struggle. Even the kids who are quiet, who slip through the cracks, who you think are doing okay, you don't know what's going on in their life. If a kid is coming in class and he's kicking off, there's generally a reason behind that behavior. And I know it can be a little bit trite to say, like, remember your why, right? Why did you
Mhm.
become a teacher? Because it kind of ignores a lot of the complexities that we have to deal with
Yeah.
in everyday life as teachers. But I do think that remembering that we did choose this path for a reason is important. I don't know that I believe in everything happens for a reason. I don't know that I'm that set in that spiritual philosophy just yet, but I have
Mhm.
been very fortunate that everything in my career has kind of fallen into place as I
Mhm.
feel like it needed to at the time. I got the
Mhm.
job straight out of uni. It was in both of the KLAs. It was close to home. When I needed to
Mhm.
retrain, that opportunity came up. So
Mhm.
I think as well, the lesson that I have learned is that you do have to rely a little bit on opportunity coming, but at the same time, you have to be prepared to take those opportunities. And that's something I try to teach my kids all the time. They don't know what awaits them in future. They don't know if they're going to need to use semicolons one day in the future, or what Shakespearean quotes they might need in a trivia competition or whatever.
Yeah.
But there is no such thing as wasted knowledge. If you take all
Yeah.
of the knowledge that we as teachers give, or that the kids give us, we can hopefully use that if an opportunity comes along.
Mhm.
So there,
And
my
use
words of
that
wisdom.
to Yeah, beautiful. Use that to make your own kind of, magic in the world. And yeah, that was beautifully, beautifully said. I couldn't have said that better myself. Yeah. Well, I think that's a fabulous way to end on those beautiful words of wisdom from Danielle. Danielle, thank you
Hopefully they
so
make
much
sense.
for yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Is there anything else you wanna say as we wrap up here, or just any final thoughts you might have?
Is it too late to say don't forget to like and subscribe?
I love that. You may do that for me. Give me a break from that. That'd be fabulous.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you for, giving us your kind of teacher origin story, and then, talking to us very authentically about the trials and the tribulations that you personally went through that really, reshaped who you are as a teacher and led you to this teacher librarian role, which I have no doubt you were meant to do. I'll take on the spiritual aspect for you. I have no doubt that that was where you were meant to be, and that all the things that you taught before that just really helped solidify this role for you, because you are killing it. You're doing great. So just
Thank you.
thank you again for showing up and being so raw and honest. And I know that a lot of our listeners will really enjoy, hearing this new perspective from a role that we don't maybe have a lot of familiarity with. There's only ever really one teacher librarian in a school. Is that right?
Yeah, it's usually a very isolated job. So,
Yeah.
and as I said, it depends a lot as to the level of support from the senior executive as to what that role looks like. But thank you
Mhm.
so much for giving me this opportunity to advocate for my role and to talk a little bit about what I do and what I love to do. And thank you again for everything that you've
Yeah.
done over the last few years.
Thank you. That is an absolute pleasure to have you. Thank you so much. Listeners, thank you for listening to another Teacher Tales episode. We're really hoping to get more teachers from the community on here to share their insights and their beautiful words of wisdom, just like Danielle has. Thank you so much, and you'll catch us in your ears next week with a new episode. All right, bye.